is again.
We abbreviated as MERML, and they call me Mermal.
Okay.
But Metadata and Electronic Resource Management Librarian. Doesn't even fit in an org chart. It's great.
All right. Well, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Okay, I have a whopping 4 slides, and we're relatively new to Easy Proxy. I think we set it up a couple of years ago, and I've only been managing it for about a year, with the caveat that we are whatever the equivalent of total care is. Basically, we contact OCLC and they update stanzas and things for us. So I can see some things, but I can't see some others. So I decided to do more of a generic overview of the process, and then an overview of the authentication process, and one slide on where things tend to break and exactly which thing is breaking, which actually, when I wrote it up, proved to be quite useful thinking through this. So hopefully it'll prove so for y'all. So ignore Easy Proxy Service, could be Open Athens, could be a whole bunch of stuff, but generally the overall process is somebody, finds an article, they want to get full text, and when they click on this in your discovery layer or your catalog or whatever you happen to call it, it sends you to a proxy server to do the authentication. Now, if you don't have a proxy server, this can be, authenticated through your own management system. But I'm assuming we're in bigger campuses and want people off campus to get to stuff. So talking about proxy servers. So to authenticate, after it gets the authentication process, it goes and sends the proxy server IP address to the content provider, and that's your publisher, your vendor. And they look at that IP address against their register list of addresses, and they go, oh yeah, that matches, and you're allowed to have things. So it sends the content back. The content goes back through the proxy server and then back to the user. So that's kind of the overarching process. But the fun part is the authentication. And I'm going to try and move this guy up out of the way. Give me a sec here. And ignore the fact this says Kerberos. Just this is essentially your credential server. So in our case, we call it MyFSU. This stores your login. It can also be called a Student Information System, or SIS. The middle bit here is your proxy server. This is going to be the browser you start with, and then this is going to be your content server. It took me a while to find this diagram in case you're wondering why I didn't relabel everything. So step 1, your browser generally have a prepended URL to send it to the proxy server, and this is SSL encrypted. It goes over there. And then the proxy server looks for the URL in the config file, which in Easy Proxy is called the stanza. So it checks it against its little file to go, okay, is this something that I'm allowed to, pass through, or is it something that I don't have listed? Once it sees it's in the file, it then is going to make a request from your credential server. So again, Student Information System, etc. And that, when it makes the actual request, this is when your person logs into the credential server. You don't actually log into the proxy server at any time you're exchanging info with the credential server. The credential server will then send back to the proxy server just a token. It's essentially a yes or no token that says, yes, this person is allowed to have access, or no, they're not. Things do get a little more complicated with alumni, but easy example, it's a yes or a no. It may send also back to the browser a cookie for your session. That way you don't have to constantly be, bothering the credential server and logging in. And then the proxy server then, now that it knows you can have access, it goes out to your content server and it goes, hey, I want stuff, here's my IP address, that's the same address for your proxy server. It stays stable and it goes, oh, okay, yeah, sure. And it sends back the content through the proxy server and back to the browser. So yeah, I know. Clear as mud if you're not used to working through this. So I'll go through some pain points. One thing to keep in mind is as people use more and more what they call virtual private networks or VPNs, having this authentication process becomes more and more critical. And there are other ways to authenticate that aren't your student information system credential server. So places are looking at doing things like, credentialing through Google and Facebook and things like that, which ends up putting a whole nother series of fun into it. But okay. And that was all I wanted to cover on that. So where do things break? Or where can things break? Get you move? Okay. All right. So the easiest part to break, or at least to detect, is for some reason the URL for the content, when someone clicks on it from your discovery layer or where have you, doesn't have a prepend or any sort of proxy information that sends the user to the proxy server to make the request to the proxy server. So essentially what it's going to do, you have a direct URL to the content server. So it's an article URL, no proxy. And the content server like EBSCO or what have you will send back a thing like, hey, you're not authorized to use that, log in here, and it'll look like a personal login screen and generally sends people in a bad direction. The second one is the URL is not in the proxy server's config file, and that's when you're missing a stanza or have an update a stanza or they changed it, added a new subdomain, things like that. These will generally return back a page that says, I think in easy proxy cases, something like, oops, this is a bad place to be, and please contact your library administrator for more details if you think you should have access. That's generally the one I get the most often is the proxy server access error, and then you sort of have to trigger back to, okay, is it this, is it the proxy server issue, or is it further back as to, why it's causing the problem. If you have your login credentials rejected, so when you're logging into the credential server and it doesn't let you log in, usually, again, if it's a student information system, we would have to send them to IT. If you're managing, your credential system directly within, say, your library management system like Alma, and you're just using those instead of using a third-party credential server, then they would contact the library. But for us, if your login credentials are rejected because of, some sort of lag time in the loads of patrons, which happens nightly, we send you to IT. The credential server can also send back a no token. People can log in, but for some reason, depending on your access setup, it can send back a no token that says, this is alumni and they're not allowed into this because of whatever reason. So that generally results in another proxy server access error, which makes it sort of hard to triangulate which of these two it is sometimes. Oh, and I just bumped that, so sorry. And last but not least, the proxy IP, the easy proxy IP in our case, not being registered with the content server. So that's when EBSCO or another database vendor, says something like, once you log into easy proxy, it then gives you there like, you're not allowed to access this. So it's like, okay, well, I authenticated. So that's definitely something to do with the proxy server IP not being registered in the right place or with the content provider. So let me know if you want me to back up on any of these. I tried to make good diagrams. That's about all I have.
Does anybody have questions?
I have a question. We've had Easy Proxy forever, but we've always been self-hosted. I'm just curious, what's been your experience with OCLC? Have they been responsive and good to work with, or has it been a problem at all?
They've been good to work with in terms of managing Easy Proxy. I'm having some issues with working with them on a WMS thing for ILL, but Easy Proxy team seems to be pretty okay. But then again, we're smallish, so if they turn something around in 2 to 24 hours, I'm happy. Usually it's add this.
So your wait time for them to fix stuff is usually like to add like a stanza or something's usually less than a day.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
that's pretty good. Yeah. Troubleshooting obviously much longer.
What were you using before you switched to eProxy?
Our automation librarian hand wrote CGI scripts that I guess did the same thing, because we would replace different database URLs in the 856 fields in Sierra with these like CGI scripts that ended in a question mark, and then we'd append like the identifier. And according to Stila, who is now in California, when Rick set up eProxy when he left, he kind of set it up similar to that, because she's like, what we were doing was like a script that literally like said that like this IP is now one of our range IPs.
Asia,
So I wish.
we were
Go,
using
Fran. I'm
WAM.
sorry.
We were using WAM. I mean, what she said is right, but we were using WAM when we were on Millennium.
Makes sense.
Scripts, I guess, are part of WAM. Sorry, this is Fran. I work with Asia. And it was, yeah. But we moved to eProxy, which makes, you probably all know, there's a lot of things about eProxy that work better than what WAM does, which is the innovative one.
We just switched from WAM to Open Athens, and I'm very happy.
I didn't know you had snuck in.
Yep.
I was wondering what the order was, because I'm like, when I left, I know the CGI script thing. Then I was like, well, we had way, way, way back, but that was before me.
I've got a general question for everybody, really. I attended a webinar that talked about having students and staff understand exactly how the proxy works, how IPs work, just kind of doing a tutorial for them so that they know the different levels that things can break and they understand that. And I thought it was a pretty good idea, but I kind of got outvoted that they thought that was too much information. So I'm curious what you guys think. Would that be helpful?
I don't know for the students, but if I could get my coworkers to watch and remember it, it would be. I know some very like basic videos we had to watch in my master's program for security on like even just how the internet works, because I asked one of the teenagers about that. And it's like, no, I'm like, here's an IP address and this resolves to this, and this is what domain name, server does. Oh.
I was thinking that if the students had a little bit more knowledge about what they were seeing as far as an error message, they might be more likely to report it. Because every semester I start out, you got to let me know if there's a broken link or if you get an error message or something's not working. And I rarely hear anything. I know they're out there, but the students don't report them. And it's kind of frustrating.
We added like a broken link service in Alma, kind of similar but very different than like how ILL is configured, so that I think it sends it to a, I can't remember what the lib form thing is, libwizard, that sends it a form that ends up getting emailed to somebody. The upside of that is you get more reports. The downside is sometimes because of the way dynamics work, you can't always replicate exactly what they're seeing or not seeing in terms of like the portfolios or, the links listed for the vendors.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Krimpasky. It's really, you guys have two Frans on this call, which is unusual, but we had been thinking and playing around with having sort of a page or a report form where students could report broken links more quickly just to a group of people so that it could work. And then also giving a little bit of background about what they may run into as examples. So I think it's kind of similar to what you're talking about, Leanne.
Mhm.
But like you, it kind of didn't get off the ground because people thought it was too much information for the students. It was like, they really just want to report, they just want to report a problem. They don't want to know why, you know? So,
Yeah.
so I've been thinking about looking at some other websites and coming up with, you know, some models that other places have used as a guide to maybe create even a library guide that might be helpful for that. So kind of in a similar place, I think.
Yeah.
I had a question. I'm with Glen Oaks Community College, so when you say you're from Ferris and you're pretty small, I kind of laugh at that. But I've had recent discussions a lot with IT, who seems to think that we can provide what Easy Proxy is with a single sign-on provider. And I started to argue with them that we needed Easy Proxy because of IP authentication. And then I started looking at some of our vendors and looking at their authentication options. And SAML is an option where I can go directly from this identity provider, potentially, and circumvent Easy Proxy. Do you guys know anything about that possibility, whether that's even possible?
I haven't done any research on it, but it looks like it's becoming more possible, at least from the content provider side, because I see the universal logins and like EBSCO databases where it's like, hook up your Google. And I have enough issues with that because my Google's like where my personal account is, and yeah, trying to log in through my email under a different address screws it all up. So I don't want to do that, but I have seen that that's like becoming a thing. And I know we had like a brief talk long ago in the hall before COVID hit about that once, but nothing in detail. I'd be leery of it just because it links different credentials, but then we're back to do students really care about their privacy as much as we care about their privacy? Which I feel mean saying that, but a lot of the time they're like, oh yeah, no, I don't care if it's hooked up to my Google account because, you know, my university email goes in there anyway, and and it would be great.
Well, they aren't necessarily, in this particular instance, what they're selling me. And I was on the calls and they talked well above my head. But what they're trying to sell me on, or their identity provider is it's just it's an identity provider that checks the credentials no different than against Active Directory. Actually, I think it creates it on its own. I think it's circumvents Active. I don't know, but in any event, so it's a direct connection between the college's identity provider and the vendor. And I double checked with like some of the big ones, EBSCO and Gale and whatnot, and they have that capability. But I'm like, if every librarian in the world is using Easy Proxy, am I missing something? I mean, I suppose I could try it with a vendor that maybe isn't used as much and see what happens.
The only thing I think might be an issue, but I don't know, because Easy Proxy is rewriting the IP. If you're logging directly in, then you have to make sure that your accounts on your side are synced with every single vendor, because that's the other issue with that. Because we have a slight lag sometimes with doing student information loads, because we could, in theory, hook Alma up into Banner so that they would be, you know, simultaneously synced. But for security reasons, the fact that people weren't like in IT weren't real familiar with the scripting, we didn't do that at the time. So now I think we're set up where we like load every day, new patrons that come in. And most of the time it's fine, but every so often you get that one person that, wandered over across campus and is like, hey, I want something right now. So that would be my worry with that. I recently got the IP registry set up for us so that we don't have to constantly be doing that with vendors. And heads up to anyone else who decides they want to do that. Because I spent like a week emailing IT. Your university will be listed in there based on like some publishers that probably provide it to them, like DeGruyter. Because I thought our like university IT had registered us, and I like went through a few people being like, who runs this account? Because I don't remember setting it up, but it says our university, so someone over there set it up, which would be great. And then they're like, no, you're supposed to manage that. And then I wrote them and they're like, oh yeah, we assume people will just see their university and claim their account. I'm like, okay. So if you haven't done that, that's like the IPregistry.org, and essentially you can put all your campus IPs in one place, and then publishers can go there to like update their side of the authentication process, which is totally helpful in times of like we switched from being easyproxy local hosted to being easyproxy total care, and we had to update like all of our easyproxy IPs, and every so often for some odd reason we find an old pre-appended URL that sends you to the old server and then sends up a angry page, and I'm like, why is that oh, that's right, it's thinking it's going to a local server that no longer exists.
We're
Can I ask a
registered with,
question?
oh, yeah, go ahead, Jana.
Well, it's sort of, it might be pivoting, it's sort of pivoting away from this. So just go ahead and then let me know.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, we're very new to easyproxy. We just got it up and running in December. So I have a couple kind of dumb questions about it. First, our students we're all authenticating through our Gmail, our MSP Gmail, address, or .edu address. What happens with turnover in students when they come and go? How do the new ones get? Are they just recognizing the MSP.edu part, or how does easyproxy know to authenticate that batch? And you're talking about new loads and stuff. What does that actually look like on the back end?
It should be reaching out to your central identity service and then just saying, does this person exist? And then it says, yep. And then it says, is this password right? And it says, yep. And then it lets them through. So easyproxy doesn't care if there's new people, because your central service will have it. It just checks, does this person exist in the central thing? Okay, cool. Are they entering the right password? Great. They're fine to go through now.
So when you say central service, you're probably from a bigger school. Like, so is that my IT person having, all the addresses loaded into a central place that's accessible somehow by easyproxy?
So someone on campus should be managing like a central identity store. Could be Active Directory. Okay. It could be a number of different things. But there should be something. I don't know what everyone else uses. We have Active Directory at Valley.
Usually the thing you like log into to register, to get your email, or to do request your vacation time. Essentially, it's usually that password. So sometimes it's your student information number. If you guys have Banner, that's a common student information system. You can, and I was talking about patron loads because our patrons are loaded into Alma in order to be able to check books in and out and things like that. When easyproxy is authenticating, Patrick's right, that's going to a totally separate server, like managed by your university or institution IT for the most part, because that, contains course things, FERPA data, all sorts of stuff you don't. The only time you interact with it is like library fines. So yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to weigh in on the responsiveness of OCLC. They were great when we set up easyproxy. We are hosted.
But we've had glitches when I've had to go into the tech support portal and request a new stanza. Or, I mean, I'm not requesting the stanza for us, but to let them know we have a new e-resource. So I guess if anyone has any advice on how to like get their attention, because it can take a couple of days, when I feel like this should be really simple. I mean, I'm just providing them with a URL and saying this is live, you know, can you add it? And then it just can drag on. So I just didn't know if there's some language that I should be using instead, or a way to, I don't know, flag it. So to just let them know this is a real quick thing that you guys could do really fast for us.
I've had much better luck. If it's something I want done immediately, I call them. And then they'll take care of it quickly. But yeah, when you open support tickets, it can be forever with OCLC.
Yeah. And then they kind of work overnight sometimes, and it's just, it's been a problem. And we actually lost access to psych therapy, to APA psych therapy for 3 weeks, because I was going back and forth between EBSCO and Easy Proxy trying to troubleshoot. It was not good. So still trying to understand how to use those portals to get our problem solved more expediently.
No, I've had
I don't
good
know.
luck calling.
I don't know if there's a way to flag it off the top of my head in OCLC, but I know in like the Ex Libris one, if you have something like the psych database you mentioned, you can flag it as like component down and mark the importance as like high, you know, because if it's an actual thing that is broke that you have to be into now, obviously that's not going to work so much as a rollout, but you can always mark it high, and then the tier 1 person's like, oh, this person wants this now, and then if they mark it down further, you can always escalate, is like their word for it, a case, to like push it further up the chain of people. Because that's always my problem. They read it and they're like, oh yeah, no, it's this. And it's like, no, I tried that, and I tried that, and I've cleared my browser cache, and please push me to tier 2. I was just having a guy I could call.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of times when I open a ticket, I always want to start out with, yes, I have cleared my cache. It's done. Start after that.
I do that as well. I definitely do that now. Yeah.
My problem is I assume other people do it, and then I find out my coworkers who are like, this is broken. I'm like, I'm trying to troubleshoot, and that's like somebody else. Did you clear the cache? Oh, no, it works. I assumed you called me after. Okay, I need to stop assuming. That's the basic.
Does anybody else have questions or something else you want to talk about? Questions on anything?
I do. We have a new systems librarian, and so in looking at Easy Proxy, we're hosted Easy Proxy. She found out that we're 2 versions behind, and we have to set up a upgrade. And I'm wondering, has anyone had to do that with OCLC hosted? Because I've not experienced that in the past. I was like, I don't know what this is. I was not in charge of that part of it. So I was like, I don't know exactly what this, you know, we do have, it sounds like we have to upgrade to two new versions. So just curious if anyone's, no, nothing.
I can tell you that we're self-hosted,
Uh-huh.
and upgrades are generally really painless. So my guess is for OCLC, they're very, very painless, and on our end, they take like 15 minutes. Like they're super fast. So I don't think it should be an issue at all for you to just reach out to OCLC and have them do it.
Yeah, they said just put in the ticket and they'll do it, but we didn't, having no experience. I appreciate your at least a time frame on that. So thanks.
Well, now you have me concerned because I don't know that I've paid attention to what version we are. I get notifications all the time that they're doing updates. or server maintenance or something of that nature, but I don't know that I've actually ever looked at the version number. I might have to do
Yeah.
that. I just assume they did it because we pay for them. I mean, what am I paying for them?
If they're
Honestly,
hosting it, yeah, they
Well,
should be
that's
updating it, right?
That's what I
Yeah.
kind of thought. So but
Yeah.
I don't have experience in this at all. So, we'll set it up and schedule. I guess maybe they just want to schedule a time. So they
It's
want to make sure that
poss-
we've set up a time with them to do it that doesn't interfere or something. So
I suppose it's possible if you just replace your systems librarian that the previous one may have said don't update without prior approval. I guess that
could
could
be.
happen.
Okay. Anybody other questions or topics to talk about?
Well, I was just gonna add, I hope the easy proxy thing goes well. I am slightly skeptical now that it's been a few years, but I discovered a couple years into my job here that our SFX holdings had never been updated in like 3 years since they set up the first extract for our Primo, and we were like hosted. So I was like, how did this not ever get extracted and updated? It was very weird. So now I'm like, okay, question all assumptions, like your holding files are being sent.
Well, I was hoping that Jerry was going to be here today. Jerry has volunteered she wants to co-chair the Electronic Resources IG next year. So if anybody would be willing to co-chair with her, she is willing. Did you raise your hand, Deja?
Considered volunteering for that if I could find a co-chair. I was going to try and twist Fran's arm, but that's okay. I twist Fran's arm.
That would be great. Yeah, Patrick and I have done, I think this is 3 years now, but, and actually I've learned a lot, and it's been worthwhile. So I'm glad we can keep it going.
I wanted to thank you for welcoming me in the middle of the meeting today. I was listening, but not watching. It's my first meeting, and I've been on the listserv for a little bit. And just as by way of introduction, I work at the Michigan School of Psychology, which is a small graduate school of about, I think we're FTE 180 graduate students in clinical psychology. So thank you. I'm looking forward to attending more meetings and learning more.
Great. Well, welcome. Yeah, that is small.
Yeah, you win the
Yeah.
small award. 'Cause I was listening to UCLA
Am I
thing,
what?
and they were like, very small. We have like, 40 librarians. And I'm like, you put all people in my building. I don't know if you 40 of us.
We have 2.
No.
I wanted to thank Leanne and Patrick for leading us these 3 years. You've done a great job. I haven't been here the whole 3 years, but it's certainly been informative and a great group. I know we're small, but I feel like I've learned a lot too. So it's nice to have this networking.
Yeah.
Mostly thank Leanne. She keeps us on track.
Yeah. Not always. I've had a couple moments where I think, what's today? Do we have a meeting today?
I did that today.
Well, all right. I think, let's see, I was going to look up what we're talking about next time.
I think that's accessibility.
Yes, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And Fran,
Think of
you're
it-
going to be talking about accessibility, correct?
And then I don't think I could find anyone that was willing to talk about diversity. So we are looking for someone else on campus to follow up Fran from a student perspective right now, and reaching out to our disability support office to have them talk about what they see students running into, like what issues are students on campus running into with library resources at Grand Valley, to kind of follow up what Fran's talking about.
So it's all going to be focused on accessibility.
If he says yes, if not, you might be the only speaker. So we don't know yet.
Well, let me know too, because I mean, we have a wonderful person who's in charge of our accessibility, like on campus and stuff, and she might have some ideas for how to like add some more content as well. She worked at Ferris for a while, then she was at Purdue for a while, and she's come back, and I think she's looking for opportunities to work with other people, and definitely a lot with the library. So let me know if we can help with that.
Will do.
Speaking
Thank you.
of DEI stuff, I saw an interesting email on one of the Ex Libris listservs this morning that was talking about, and I guess they just started like an anti-bias group for, you know, their flagship products, because somebody apparently, they were indexing terms and showing them in like their facet for subject searches that were problematic and ethnic and racial slurs. So they wanted some way of still having those terms indexed for search, but not displaying. And now it's sort of brought up some interesting like questions on the listserv. Like from my point of view, there's a lot of like overlap in terms that could be offensive, but also in other contexts could not be, depending on, you know, how you structure that. And should you have hidden terms, because it makes it even more fun to troubleshoot why things are displaying or not displaying when you can't tell what the heck it's matching on. So I try to be a critical cataloger, but now I'm looking at this, especially from a global perspective, because they have a lot of like people down in Australia on the OMA system. So they talk a lot about like Aboriginal rights and things like that. So I don't know, let's wrap your head around. Figured I'd throw that out there.
All right. Well, I think we can wrap it up today unless anybody has something else. All right. Well, hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Deja. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Fran. I always like talking to Fran.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Fran.